Hello, Moonflower. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Carolyn. I am your host. If it's your first time here, welcome. So lovely to spend some time with you. And if it's not your first time here, welcome back. Nala says hi as well. She's hanging out in the office today. So let's get right into it, shall we? In today's episode, we are talking about, or I guess I'm talking about, and you're listening, but we're having a conversation about why we're all so freaking tired, ways that you can cultivate a more sense of feeling rested. So I've got a list of like 10 tips, but 10 things to maybe think about, and also how this might be a way of being part of a quiet revolution. But before we get into today's episode, this is just a gentle invitation to become a subscriber if you're not already. So maybe you're watching on YouTube, maybe you're listening in. Subscribe to wherever you would like to. Share this episode with a friend. And if you're watching on YouTube, I would love if you would comment below. Seems like a little thing, but I know that there's quite a few of you who do watch on YouTube, and that is a very simple and easy and small way for you to help support this free resource so that more tender-hearted souls can be part of this cozy community. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Moonflower Path podcast. This space is for the highly sensitive, the creatives, the earth-loving, the caregivers, the weirdos, the feelers, the change makers, and dreamers of the world. Here, we are all about guiding you to trust your body intuition so you can find home and shift culture. Through the exploration of somatic practice, self-care, and seasonal ritual, my hope is that you will be inspired to be in harmony with yourself and in a dance with the earth. I'm your host, Carolyn, and I'm so honored and grateful to be here with you today. When I started putting together this episode, there was one goal I had in mind, and it was to get you to say a big old yes to resting more. And the way I thought I'd get you there was through listing all the facts I could find about how tired we all are collectively. Quote such and such a study, such and such a book, and talk about the history of rest. Yet something else got me more curious as I was moving through my so-called research, because honestly, it was all getting a bit tiresome to read all the article headlines. The thing I find fascinating is we know we're all tired. We know the stats, we know the facts, and honestly, are they facts? Are people more stressed and more tired than they've ever been before? Can we even answer that question? How many studies were being done 100 plus years ago on the collective's feelings around being rested? Also, many of the studies are very American-centric, so the global view isn't actually very accurate. And all in all, this approach felt pretty clinical, and that's not really what I'm all about. So, okay, we know the things. We know that resting is important, and we know that a lot of us are feeling very tired, even just in the conversations that we have with each other of how you feeling? Oh, I'm really busy, I'm really tired. And I want to talk about that. Why are we still tired? You'd think that once we realized something, things would change, right? Well, wouldn't that be the ideal? It's not always the reality. What is it that keeps affecting our collective tiredness? And honestly, I don't really want to sit here and pretend like I have all the answers. There's, again, places that you can find the exact answers. But here are a few things to think about, some of my own thoughts on the why. The effects of technology, information overload, a society that doesn't actually prioritize rest, a collective scarcity mindset leading to overwork, and a collective knowledge of pain and hurt and injustice, and a struggle in knowing what to do about it and in giving ourselves time to process it. And I think that there is one really big one. And I'd love to be a part of a quiet revolution that is already starting to happen, which is not shaming those who voice their need for rest. That's where I want to focus my attention in this episode. In the great words of Tracy Chapman, don't you know they're talking about a revolution? It sounds like a whisper. As much as we can point to the broken systems we live in and talk about it forever, and don't get me wrong, it's true, the society we live in is not one that supports rest. The systems we work in don't support rest. Yet change on a macro scale takes time. And while we're tired now, so what do we do now on a micro level? I think it starts with each other. It starts with ourselves and in our relationships. So if it starts with ourselves, when's the last time you took a proper nap? I get it. Your response to me with that question might be when. When, Carolyn? I don't have time. Okay, great. And I get that. And I want to absolutely recognize the privilege and even asking that question or even pondering on that question. But I ask it anyways because I don't know your situation and I would love for you to get curious about what your relationship with rest is. Do you avoid rest, pausing, taking breaks, prioritizing even just quiet time because you don't have the time, or because it's something that just keeps getting dropped to the bottom of your list, or maybe it doesn't even make it to your list because it's not that important. You just kind of have to push through. I think at this point it becomes a combination of our real life situation, what our schedules look like, what our family life looks like, at the same time as a mentality as well. And it's not your fault. It's a societal mindset. But again, it starts with ourselves. And I'm asking you these questions not from a place of being on the other side of like, I feel well rested all the time. No, there are periods of time where I feel very low energy. It usually comes when there's changing of seasons. If you're listening to this episode live, this episode has come out in November, and this episode is kind of the introduction to the monthly theme in the community space, the Moonflower Path Community Space. And this month, the entire month, we're focusing on rest. And that's because of my own personal experience. I tend to get really tired around this time of the year. And years ago, it was a struggle and it was something I would push against. And it was something I would feel shameful of. And it was something I wouldn't really talk about because I was worried that if I said I was feeling really low energy, that folks would judge me for it or try and tell me all of the ways that I can alleviate that sensation. But now at this point, it's turned into a beautiful opportunity to get curious about, okay, what can I do about it? Not to change it, but to actually lean into it. So these are questions that I have had to ask myself and that I gently invite you to get curious about as well. Honestly, I could list out countless times where I set aside my desire for a break, a pause, a restful moment out of fear of judgment. I could list out other times where I did take that break and got vocally judged for it, or got advice on how to actually change it. And this is where I think we need to really re-examine things. Are the voices in your head telling you you need to push through, are they truly yours? Or are they voices coming from others that you fear will judge you for quitting, pausing, resting, or taking things easy, right? Are those things in your mind from other people that have told you that this is the case, or society having told you the case that all of those things, again, like quitting, pausing, resting, or taking things easy, right? Reducing effort that you put into things as lazy. Have you even taken time to acknowledge why you're so tired sometimes? What emotions and situations you haven't given yourself time to process? The particularities of maybe being a highly sensitive person, an empath, or even just a person who feels a lot and who knows what's happening in the world on a big level or just in your immediate world? Are you offering yourself the same courtesy and kindness you would to a friend who voices their need for rest? Or are you even offering others in your life courtesy of acknowledging and respecting their need for rest? Or even checking in with them about it? How are we perpetrating our collective tiredness in the way we speak to ourselves and each other around the topic or the glorifying of doing more? How do we speak to ourselves and each other around the topic of taking time away from doing? So that's one gentle question that I have for you, or I guess quite a few questions that I have for you. As Tricia Hersey, the author of Rest is Resistance, says, treating each other and ourselves with care isn't a luxury, but an absolute necessity if we're going to thrive. Resting isn't an afterthought, but a basic part of being human. Okay, so here are 10 tips on getting more rest. Hello, gentle listener. Carolyn here, interrupting today's episode to tell you about our new free resource called In Tune with the Moon. Learn to listen to, trust in, and honor your body intuition so you can feel empowered to take up space in your life with the moon by your side every step of the way. This free resource includes digital moon phase calendars. So that's pretty phone wallpapers and widgets that have a moon phase calendar on them from now until the end of the year, and they'll be updated in the new year. 4 lunar ritual videos that are about 30 minutes in length and always follow the same comforting ritual of some gentle yoga, some meditation, and some lunar-inspired journal prompts. And yes, these are cozy and accessible. All bodies, all mobility levels are very much welcome. And a digital lunar journal to deepen your relationship with yourself and the moon. By downloading this resource, you'll also begin to receive our monthly Moonflower Journal, filled with cozy and seasonal self-care resources. Have I mentioned that it's all for free? Get in tune with the moon as well as with yourself by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting our website, themoonflowerpath.com. Number 1, create a ritual around your rest. This is a resource that I recently put together to come out in the Moonflower Path Community Space. So there's a video, a resource for the Moonflower members, which you can become if you click the link in the show notes. And it walks members through prompts and questions and offers a bunch of different examples on what a either bedtime or just a restful ritual could look like. And the idea of rituals, and you know this already if you listen to this podcast, is when we create a ritual around something, it turns something into something sacred, something yours, something special, something intentional. And maybe that could be a beautiful way to invite in some more rest or a little bit more care around the times that you bring yourself to bed. Number 2, make it realistic. How much time could you actually dedicate to offering yourself a bit more rest, right? You might listen to this episode and you might think, oh my gosh, okay, yes, like I totally want to go to bed earlier, or I want to take more naps, or I want to book in more time to go to the spa or whatever. And all of that is great, but being realistic will actually make it attainable. So make it realistic. Number 3, talk about it with your friends and family. Again, how are we supporting each other in this? How are we normalizing this idea of not always glorifying that we're so busy all the time? Talk about it with your close community. Talk about your desire to live maybe a slower, a simpler, a more restful life. Number 4, get to the root cause. What is causing you to feel more drained? How could you examine your relationship with that thing? maybe don't get rid of it. Maybe don't change it entirely. If you're a mom with a bunch of kids, you can't really change the reality. But maybe there is an opportunity here to get support, ask for help. We live at this point, and you know this, I'm not telling you something that you don't know. We live in a very individualistic society. It's kind of every person for themselves. And it used to be that we lived in communities and that we supported each other. And I don't really know if back then, if people felt more rested or not, because different life circumstances. But there is something to this idea of how has this shift from being community oriented to the way that we live now shifted our relationship with feeling rested or at least supported. Number 5. Instead of giving you a list of more things to do around getting more rest, is there a way that you could look at your life and maybe do less? Pare down. Again, this comes to this idea of being busy, of having a lot of things on your plate. Maybe that's a contributing factor. So getting curious about how you might be able to do less. There's this idea, this phenomenon that happens in the self-care industry. I don't really know if that's an industry, but this world of self-care is that it's about offering you more products to buy, more routines to do, time blocking, get this agenda. And this space is not really one where I want to just be throwing more things on your list. This is a space where I hope that you can feel that part of self-care is actually paring down, simplifying, and creating more space. Number 6, examine the content you're taking in. Is it contributing to an unhealthy relationship with productivity, the people you surround yourself with? Examine the content you're taking in. Is it encouraging you to glorify hustling and pushing through and just sucking it up and ignoring your body's signals to rest? Or are they encouraging you to get curious about your body's signals for its need to rest? Number 7, one thing that helps me in giving myself permission to rest more is to look at how much I already do, how productive I already am, to look at my list and go, you know what? I don't need to feel guilty about the fact that I want to do less maybe during this particular season or period of time in my life, in my year, in my season, in my week, whatever, because look at how much I've done. Look at how much I've already done this week. Look at how much I've already accomplished and created this year. So that is a way that I like to tell myself that I don't have to feel guilty for doing less, maybe during a certain period of time. You know, of course, I'm not trying to make like an army of zombies who just like do nothing all the time, but I know that you're already doing a lot. And so maybe there's like a guilt or a shame around, you know what, I'm going to take the day off, or I'm going to take the afternoon off, or I'm going to take this hour for myself because I've already done a lot. Number 8, learn about why rest is so important. When I learned, and as I've learned within the past few years of my own self-care journey, more about the actual effects, the positive effects of sleep on my brain, on my body, the more it becomes more difficult to ignore its need to be prioritized in my life. There's some pretty fascinating things, some pretty fascinating studies that show what actually happens in your brain, what happens in your body when it comes to feeling more rested. And it's one of those things, right? Like, you know it, and then it's hard to ignore. So maybe read a book, take in some content, do some podcast listening on your body on sleep. Number 9, examine how much you are multitasking. Did you know that only about 2.5% of the population can actually multitask? So essentially, when you multitask, what you're actually doing is not multitasking simultaneously, doing two things at the exact same time. What you're doing is you're quickly switching from one task to the other on like a micro time level, switching from task to task to task to task. Your brain is shifting from one focus to the other. And what's happening is that switch from task to task is what drains our energy so quickly. It's that act from task to task, and you're doing it again and again and again super quickly in a short period of time. And that is something that drains our energy much quicker than if we focus on doing one thing at a time. From start to finish, one thing at a time. So what would happen if you tried to do one thing at a time from start to finish? And this is where we could go off on a tangent on our attention spans when it comes to our use of technology, and that it's actually quite challenging to do that. And so there's ways to train and practice that reality of doing one thing and focusing on one thing at a time. And one of those things is to practice more presence and mindfulness and meditation. But I'm not here to be preachy. What I'm here is to offer you a space to get curious. So maybe that's one thing that you could examine. Number 10, claim your desire for rest, Moonflower. Become a rest queen. Become a rest pro, a rest ambassador, somebody who is so good at sleeping and resting and lounging that it's something that you actually are proud of. Talk about it, live it. Call out people who make fun of others for resting or napping or, quote, being lazy. Embrace your inner sleepy cat. This isn't about revolutionizing towards us all just doing nothing all the time, and I've mentioned that already. This is a revolution of restful people who feel so rested that they can actually finally show up in the way that they want to show up in their lives. They can create the things that they want to create. Make the change and the impact they're here to make. Have you ever thought of what you could actually do with a body that felt so rested that she or he or they was ready to truly live? This podcast is for highly sensitive, earth-loving, and creative folk. If I think of highly sensitive folk, one of the reasons why you might feel tired all the time is that you are taking in a lot more information and processing a lot more information than the average person. That will inevitably mean that you feel more drained. Claim that. That part of you is a gift, it is a superpower, it is a good thing, and you can actually do something with it if you honor it and give yourself time and space to process and recoup. If I think about creative folk, we can't be creating all of the time. We need time to dream, to percolate, to rest, to let ideas drop in their own time. So you as well, creative soul, benefit from resting. Earth-loving souls, you are somebody who is passionate about living seasonally and honoring the seasons. Look at the seasons. Fall and winter are times of slowing down, of cocooning, of resting, and an honoring time and space for things to end so that new life can come. Also, if you're an earth-loving soul and you want to help make the change and take the opportunity to be part of the solutions around climate change, again, you can't do that if you're not rested. So whoever you are listening to this podcast, those are very distinct examples on why you will benefit from rest and why I would love for you to take like a step even further into owning that and being a resting queen or king or just like badass. Let's start small and let the ripples create waves of rested selves, sleeping and then waking up to a more restful way of being. All right, Moonflower, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you love this theme, stick around. We're going to explore more in different ways how we can explore feeling more rested. If you would love to feel more rested and take a step forward and actually taking action on this journey, this exploration, then we would love to have you in the Moonflower Path Community Space. All the information to join the membership is in the link in the show notes. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to tuning in with you again very soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Moonflower Path podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn, and ways that you can find more support from me and this cozy community are all found in the show notes. Please consider rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast with a friend. Those are the best ways to show your support for this free and accessible resource. Wishing you a gentle rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting again with you very soon.